Hey everyone, welcome back to the Book Cave with me, Jenny. Today I have another Courtney over at the Book Nook Corner book club pick, and for this month, one of her books was Shatter Me, and of course with this being a series, I'm going to read the whole series and let you all know what I think of it along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into Shatter Me Series. I started listening to Shatter Me because I could not find a physical copy or a digital copy at the library. They both had a pretty long wait time, so I decided to just go ahead and listen to it. And I'm up to chapter 10 so far, and I will say it's kind of interesting. I know from different reviews that, in the book, certain lines are crossed out, and so you get kind of like a scratching noise in the audiobook where those are supposed to be. And yeah, so far I am intrigued by this. I do have some notes here, so I'm going to grab my little paper. So basically, I've got 3 books that it reminds me of. With Juliet having some sort of like lethal touch, that reminds me of Girl Serpent Thorn. And then it also reminds me of the Chemical Garden trilogy, just because of like the purple prose that's in there. And then it's also now starting to remind me a little bit of 1984, with the way that the reestablishment acts. Now, I do have quite, 3 or 4 questions. So, for one, if Juliet's touch is poison, how was her mother able to carry her? Why didn't she kill her mother in the womb? Or is it something that, developed right after she was born? Because I know she says, once she crawled, her parents didn't touch her. So, yeah. And then another thing, she's been locked up by the reestablishment for just under a year. But it states they came to power 7 years ago. And so, yeah, and then they've had her since she was 14, so they've had her for 3 years, but she's only been locked up for 1. So, what exactly is going on there? I think I may have somewhat of an idea with the chapter that I just finished. It seems like maybe it's a punishment because, she doesn't want to help them, but I'm not entirely sure about that. So yeah, like I said, so far I'm definitely finding this interesting, and I know the purple prose does bother some people. Not that it's bad, it's just can be awkward at times, but I feel like this kind of shows, she's been isolated her whole life and not shown any affection. Doesn't really have people to talk to her. And now for a year, she's literally been in solitary confinement, hasn't even seen anybody. So it makes sense in a way that, she might have some, thoughts that don't fully track just because, I feel like everybody does in a way, and everybody kind of makes a connection between 2 things that maybe somebody else wouldn't, or they see it in a slightly different way. And this is also definitely written very stream of consciousness, and so I think that has a lot to do with it as well. And I'm definitely going to be interested to see if later on in this book and further books, if it kind of changes, or if we continue to get, a lot of purple prose and kind of different similes and metaphors that are just kind of different. So I did finish listening to Shatter Me, and it stayed very interesting through the end. However, the very ending did feel a little bit X-Men-ish, and parts of the writing were just a little awkward, like my jaw hangs from my shoelace. I understand what Tara Mafi was going for and like what she was trying to say. I just feel like it's a very odd metaphor, and there were a lot like that in there. But again, I do feel like some of that is simply the fact that Juliet is not a product of a normal, healthy upbringing. She is the product of an upbringing where everybody fears and hates her, and so she has kind of stumbled through life more or less on her own. And I said then, I could see how that contributes to her odd ways of thinking and speaking. And I am not a huge fan of Warner at all, and I do know a little bit about further on in the series, so it'll be interesting to see how I come to think about Warner and Adam as I continue on in the series. So I will be continuing with the novella, which is, I believe it's Destroy Me is the next one. I cannot remember if that's the name of the 1.5 novella or if that's the bind up of 1.5 and 2.5. But I will let you know when I come back to discuss that. So the first novella was called Destroy Me. I know I said in the last one I couldn't quite remember if that was the novella or the bind up. But this is from Warner's point of view, and it's basically very briefly kind of going over his thoughts during the last, I would say, third or so of Shatter Me. And while it did add a very little bit to his past, we kind of get to see how he interacts with people and whatnot. I did feel like this was kind of unneeded in that it didn't add a whole lot to his character. And one other thing that bothered me is it really didn't touch on the fact that Juliet could touch him without harming him. And I feel like that was a big deal to him, and yet it's hardly mentioned. It was definitely interesting to see him interact with his father and kind of see the fact that he does not necessarily fully agree with the reestablishment, and so it does give me hope that his character will grow and become a little better. But we will see how that goes in further books. So Unravel Me is the second novel in the Shatter Me series, and I got to page 37 so far. And I will say, so far, I wasn't noticing, or at least not getting as annoyed by some of the kind of awkward similes when I listened. Reading it, I'm getting a little more annoyed by them, although I can still understand why, with the life that Juliet led, how she would be thinking differently and everything. I also feel like So far, there's been a lot of focus on the romance and not a whole lot on developing any of the secondary characters, or I guess they could even be, more primary characters that we've met at the very end of the last book, and they're getting to know them now in here. So all in all, it's still about 50-50 for me, and I want to see if I can find one of these similes here. So here it is. Here's one. My worries put on a fancy dress and pretend to be something else for a while. And there's just a lot that are like that they're not bad, but they're just kind of odd. And like I said, I haven't read that much. I read 37 pages. I will say, however, that it's very fast-paced to read. It's very simple writing, simple sentence structures and everything, so it's very easy to read quickly, and I do feel like that's part of why this made a good audiobook and why the first audiobook was really good. And yeah, so I'll definitely be interested to see what I think as I get further into it, but those are my thoughts so far. So I've made it just about halfway through Unravel Me, and it's still kind of just a lot of roundabout writing about everyday life, and there's not really any stakes, although we're starting to get to where there are some stakes now. But this part just was kind of threw me for a loop, because we've learned now that the reason Adam can touch Juliet is that his power negates others' powers. So he's basically negating her power whenever he touches her, but because he's getting comfortable with her, now it's harder for him to negate. And so they run into each other, literally. She trips out the door and runs into him. So Adam steadies her frame, and then she says, "He hasn't let go of me. I can hear his heart beating fast and hard and loud, and the silence between us. And he feels too still, too tense, like he's trying to maintain some kind of control over his body." And then he says, "I can't let go. I can't let go of you. I'm trying." And we know that her power, if somebody touches her or she touches them, she has to be the one to let go, because otherwise her power makes it impossible for them to let go. And so then Kenji says, "Well, it's a good thing I'm here then, isn't it?" Kenji yanks me out of Adam's arms. So the thing that gets me with this is she is wearing a suit that is long sleeves to her wrists, and pants to her ankles. And I believe it's basically a turtleneck as well. So the only thing she doesn't have is gloves, which she did at one point, but at this point she's not wearing them. So the thing is, if Adam's reaching out to steady her, I'm imagining him grabbing her maybe by her elbows or her forearms, which would be covered. And then if her power worked through clothing, how could Kenji then grab her and let go of her? So it's just kind of a little bit of a non sequitur there. And then that's the other thing. They make her this special suit. But the fact of the matter is, she doesn't need a special suit. She just needs long pants, long sleeves, and gloves. Because her power does not work through clothing. If she's wearing gloves and touches somebody, nothing happens. If they touch her over her clothes, nothing happens. So I'm not entirely sure like what's going on with that. It's just one of those things that doesn't seem too well planned out. Perhaps we'll get further explanations in the second half of the book, but I'm not entirely sure. It is still a very quick read. I'm getting through it easily 40 to 50 pages in half an hour. So it's definitely a easy to read book, and it's not horrible. It's just one of those things where, like I said, certain little details like that just seem out of place. So I finished Unravel Me, and the last probably 50 or so pages is when we finally got a lot of action to pick up, and we get the whole war and everything going. One thing I don't really get is I do not understand Juliet's attraction to Warner at all. I mean, okay, physically he's good looking, but from the way he's treated her, and yes, we do know some things from the novella, but she doesn't know that, and he is still like super obsessed, and it's just honestly kind of creepy. And yeah, it just doesn't really make sense. And then the fact that after his father shoots her, he just walks away and leaves the Healer twins in the house with her and Warner. You know they can heal. What were you thinking? Like, if that was real life, he would have checked and made sure she was dead and not just assume that, oh yeah, she's dead, I can leave. And leave the Healer twins. That's the other thing he could have done. At least he could have taken the Healer twins with him. It was just something that was like absolutely glaring to me. There were some other things that were quite glaring as well. We have a scene where Warner and Juliet are in her room. We're told that her room is pitch black. And a couple sentences later, she can see him. She can, see the outline of his face. And it just really started to irk me in this book. I guess maybe because I was physically reading it. I'll have to see what I think of the other books that I do listen to. But yeah, so overall, I mean, it's not horrible, but it's definitely YA. It definitely has its issues. If you're a fan of dystopian YA, I think you would like this. It has a lot of those kind of high stakes, or at least they're supposed to be. Well, they are. They kind of are high stakes. But I feel like that aspect of it is pushed into the background in favor of the romance. So if you like your dystopians heavy on the romance, then you might enjoy this series as well. I am interested to see where this goes and, see how the characters develop, because that is one good thing. I do feel like there is a little bit of character development, at least for Juliet. She's starting to see that, she is acting a little spoiled and selfish, and that, she can't always just be stuck in her own head. So I did enjoy that part, and I did think that part was done pretty well. And there were less crossouts throughout this book than there were in Shatter Me, I believe. It seems like it, at least. And that also kind of shows she's developing self-confidence, becoming more comfortable with saying what she is thinking, and not second-guessing herself. So I will be going on to the next novella after this, and I shall report back on that. Fracture Me is the second novella in this series, and this one is from Adam's point of view, and this one I felt like it was a little harder to tell his voice from Juliet's. There were a couple of kind of awkward metaphors in that, and this is one thing that Destroy Me, from Warner's point of view, did not have. So this one was kind of a mixed bag. A lot of it was just a retelling of the last probably third or so of book 2, just from Adam's point of view. And it was kind of interesting to get a little bit of a more glimpse into him and to see how much he cares about his little brother and stuff. So that part I did enjoy. And I do feel like so far these novellas tend to work a little better than the novels. You know, as with the actual novels, these are very quick and fast paced and easy to read, but I also don't feel like it gets quite as bogged down with details as some of the first 2 novels have in parts. I feel like this is a much more snappy, tightly plotted story than some of the other ones. So yeah, I will now be going on to Ignite Me, which is the final book in the original trilogy, and be giving you my thoughts on that as I work through it. So I'm about 100 pages now into Ignite Me, and I left the book at work, so I don't get to read any more of it until tonight. But so far, I am enjoying it more than the first 2. I feel like the writing has gotten a lot tighter, and there's no strikeouts so far, and there is an author's note in the beginning, you know, where she said this stuff was intentional. And like I said, I could see where it was and where it's kind of showing Juliet's mind. And I like seeing this, and it's showing how she's maturing and everything. I'm still not seeing the appeal of Warner. Although he's not as bad as she originally thought, I still don't particularly like him. So, yeah, there is that. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say, other than the fact that I am starting to really like Kenji. At first, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, you know, whatever, he's a fine character. But I actually am really starting to like him now. So, I remembered to bring Ignite Me back home from work today, and I've gotten to page 182, and so far, there's not been a whole lot that has happened in, like, the war plot. It's been more a lot of relationship drama, and I really don't like Adam in this book. Like, in the first 2 books, he was a lot kinder and a lot more level-headed, and now he's just kind of becoming possessive. Like, Juliet was talking to Warner, yes, in another room with the door closed, but oh my god, what's the big deal? And Adam accuses her of lying about that, you know, that they were just talking. And he continuously won't let her speak, and continuously, like, doesn't understand that it's not that she doesn't care about him, but there's more going on than just their relationship, obviously. And, like, yeah, he's just not that great of a character in this book. And Warner is slightly better in this book. He's not near as possessive, or he's at least hiding it better. But other than that, I still really don't see his appeal. I don't really see Adam's appeal either. So I'm really hoping we get more into the rest of the plot in the second half of this book, just to kind of get something that I actually care about. And this, I do enjoy the way the writing has changed, and you get to see how Juliet is a little more secure and willing to stand up for herself. And she definitely has grown. Maybe not an amazing amount, but she has definitely grown, and I do like seeing that. And this is just as with the other books, a very, very quick read, very easy to get through. And yeah, so I am enjoying this, and it'll be interesting to see how this ends, because I know this was originally supposed to be the end of the series. It'll be interesting to see where, how it ends and what it leaves open for the second trilogy. So yeah, I'm going to get back to reading now. I've now finished Ignite Me, and I have to say it wasn't too bad. I did enjoy it. It was easily readable, the same as the rest of the series. And yeah, I still feel like it had a little bit too much of the teen angst with everything, especially considering all the background stuff. But if you do enjoy, stuff like, I guess, honestly, Divergent and Hunger Games, except I feel like Hunger Games, at least, there was a lot more focus on what was going on outside of the relationships, whereas this one, there's a lot of focus on that, but there is also a lot of focus on Juliet's growth, and I do enjoy seeing the growth that she has. And yeah, so I would definitely recommend this if you're kind of into the YA dystopias. And that is where I'm going to end this video. I will finish up the next 3 books plus 3 novellas in another video that I'll hopefully have posted by the end of August. So as always, thank you for joining me. And if you like my videos, make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button to get notified every time I post something new. And my Discord will be linked in the description as well. And as always, I will see you next time in the book cave.